Today on Upfront, big changes to state elections, ethics, and campaign finance laws. Do they protect free speech or encourage corruption? It's our conversation today with Republican Senate President Mary Lozic and Democratic Senator Tim Carpenter. Then, Paul Ryan says he'll run for House Speaker.
I came to the conclusion that this is a very dire moment, not just for Congress, not just for the Republican Party, but for our country.
Republican Congressman Sean Duffy on whether Ryan can unite the GOP's sometimes fractious factions. And landowners fed up with foul water, why they're asking the feds for help.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. We begin today with the latest high-stakes battle in Madison, one that could have long-term implications for Wisconsin elections. Last week, the Assembly passed a Republican bill that would dismantle the Government Accountability Board, the agency that oversees ethics in elections, and replace it with two commissions comprised of equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans. The Assembly also approved an overhaul of the state's campaign finance law. The finance law changes would double contribution limits to candidates and allow candidates to coordinate with issue advocacy groups. Lawmakers also prohibited the use of secret John Doe probes to investigate misconduct in office or campaign violations. One Democratic leader said Wisconsin is now open for corruption. But Republicans say they're protecting freedom of speech and bringing Wisconsin in line with recent court decisions on campaign finance. These bills now head to the state Senate, and we're joined by Republican Senate President Mary Lozic of New Berlin and Democratic Senator Tim Carpenter of Milwaukee. Thanks to both of you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Let me begin with you, Senator Lozic. There seem to be at least a few people in the Senate Republicans who have some concerns about changes to campaign finance law, to the Government Accountability Board. What are their concerns? Can you persuade them to support these changes?
Well, I think what's very important is at the end of the day, we're going to see citizens with a more responsive, methodical, and clear process surrounding elections. And this week, of course, our caucus, we need to talk about that and see what concerns might be and see where the votes are. But really, the GAB, the campaign finance, the John Doe, they're all very intertwined. And at the end of the day, each and the three in combination will have a profound impact on citizens throughout the state of Wisconsin. Particularly the GAB. That's the one we're going to be looking at. And in hindsight, the GAB was created in a vacuum. So judges the culture of judges in the courtroom is to have a plaintiff and defendant and an attorney vigorously representing each one of them, and they listen to those. They have to put blinders on and look at the facts of the case as presented. The culture over at the GAB, that is not the culture. The judges rely on the staff for predominantly the large share of their information. So they're in a vacuum. And I don't fault the judges. I don't fault Kevin Kennedy. I don't fault the staff. I fault the model, the vacuum that they're in terms of the elections. Each of the judges, when I was the election chair, Judge LaMalis, Judge Freilich, Judge Franke, and even Judge Boki, I met with them, interviewed them. I'd have no problem if they came back with a political stripe and served on the new board. I think that'd be just fine.
Senator Carpenter, Democrats have been trying to persuade the public to stop this. Do you feel there's still any chance to stop these changes from campaign finance and GAB from occurring?
Oh, definitely. The public arose and quite angrily when the Joint Finance Committee around the 4th of July slipped into one of the last motions, basically gutting Wisconsin's open records laws, saying that legislators are above the law and citizens don't have a right to access those records. I think Senator Lozic had pointed out that there are some discussions going on in the Senate. I'm hoping that the moderate senators in the caucus will talk and keep in mind the history of how we got here. It was a caucus scandal that took place in 2001, and it was a very difficult time for the state of Wisconsin. It seems every 10 years there's a big scandal that happens in Wisconsin, and my concerns are what we're doing with the Government Accountability Board, campaign finance reform, and John Doe. We're just setting ourselves down the path for more corruption in the state of Wisconsin. It's my main worry. If you don't listen to history, you're bound to repeat it.
Let me have you address that concern, because that is the Democratic message on this, is that we're the end of clean, transparent, good government in Wisconsin is coming because of these changes. What do you say to folks who make that argument?
Well, in terms of campaign finance, what's coming is it is driven by court decisions, and it's driven by our Chapter 11 statutes that are now written in a maze of catch-22s. A person cannot navigate and read those statutes and have any semblance of how they are to file and run for election. And it's really about people, the little people, coming out and running for election and having representative government and having people being more participatory in government, because the statutes are so awful. And it's also court decisions that are driving this more than anything. The courts from the federal government on down saying speech is the most important, and we must have robust speech around elections. We've gone from, you know, very little, from the daily newspaper in bygone eras to now we've got Twitter's aflutter, we got Facebook in your face, we've got all of these things going on. So there's robust speech, and that is the most important in all of this, to allow and encourage this robust speech and citizens being participatory in that process.
Is it citizens being participatory, or what about the argument that it's going to be big money special interest groups who will be benefiting from these changes in the rules? They will be the ones participating more in
There
this.
will still be transparency, reporting, there will be all of those things taking place. They will not be stifled, their speech won't be stifled, but they will be able to have robust speech just as others have robust speech. To clamp down on them and to prohibit their speech, that is unconstitutional, and we should not be doing that.
Senator Carpenter, the argument that the Republicans make is that the law has changed, that the Supreme Court has ruled on a number of cases, and that they're simply sort of following the lead of the High Court here in rewriting campaign finance law. What's wrong with that argument?
Well, we've had referendums around the state, including Milwaukee County. 70% of the folks who voted in that non-binding referendum disagreed with the Citizens United case. And my concern is people are saying...
But it's the law, you would agree.
That's the law, but people disagree with it, and there are definite attempts and fallout from that decision. But I think Wisconsin, for example, in the campaign finance reform bill that was put forward, what it's basically allowing to do is have Brinks trucks load of money pumped into the campaign system. I don't hear constituents saying we need more money in the campaign system, we have too much. And it goes beyond the court decisions. For example, in the campaign finance report, they're taking away information. For example, where a person who's making a contribution at a certain amount, where their place of business is. There seems to be a crackdown of information. There's going to be unlimited corporate contributions. They're empowering political parties. They're empowering third-party groups. And we're really not getting access, as the United decision had said, about reporting requirements. So while we're being sold that these are all the court decisions coming down, it's your interpretation and the public support against more money in government.
His argument is the public, if you look at it and you do polls on it, the public has concerns about big money. What do you say to
Well, my thoughts are that the public's intelligent, and they can discern and they can make decisions. And if we as a government want to pass laws which are going to suppress speech so that people cannot provide that information to them, that is wrong. I don't like a lot of the speech sometimes. I don't like a lot of the things that go on. I don't like being bombarded with all the commercials either. But we must allow robust conversation. We shouldn't take one segment and say, you can't speak. As I say, there's Facebook and Twitter and email. There's just so much now, and just a cacophony of information, and that information should be robust. And we shouldn't take a segment of that and for some reason clamp it down and say, you can't speak. That is not what this is about. It should be robust.
I'm going to have to wrap things up there. The Senate President, Mary Lozic, the Republican, Senator Tim Carpenter, the Democrat. Thanks to both of you for being with us today. We appreciate it. And my discussion with Senators Carpenter and Lozic continues now on our website, where we're discussing the changes to the John Doe investigations law. You'll find that on the upfront section of WISN.com. Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan could become third in line to the presidency. Next. Ryan will run for Speaker, but can he unite House Republicans? I'll ask Republican Congressman Sean Duffy when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.